Another of the great beings that would confront you would be, of course, the angel of birth and the angel of death. They being of the same archangel development too. The one that would take you out at transition would very likely be the one you have seen many times before. And in that there is a greeting of familiarity. I've been privileged to witness death of some whom we have loved. And there is a greeting of familiarity between the one who drops his human form and the great archangel who comes and applies the electrical current which releases the spirit from the body. And there's only a moment of meeting and a moment of tremendous sympathy. You feel as though from that angel of transition, as though every atom of you and every vehicle were understood to its nth degree. There is so much affection. Where they get this knowledge of what humans suffer, I don't know, because most of these angels we encounter have never been human. There are only a few exceptions wherein we will find those who have been. But they do have great empathy and great sympathy and tremendous compassion and affection for everyone, including those for whom they are responsible. As we think of these wonderful orders of life, we appreciate tremendously the special great souls that we would be likely to encounter at certain critical periods of our own evolution. Guardian angel is the one who sees us when we come into birth. She's freed, by the way, and has a vacation when we are in God's world. She does not have to be with us. And most persons desire their guardians to be free. But when we are on earth, she is with us unceasingly, day and night. But they are also the teachers, the spiritual mothers, the exemplars, and the minor initiators of their charges. All the major initiations are taken by those who are in our own human path, but the angels of various ranks are always present at the times of enlightenment. And if one could see what he looks like and what the areas and environments around him are like, when he sheds something of himself, he would never throughout his existence forget it again. And he would so live that others might have a similar experience. From that time on, he would never have it turned his way. He would not, in other words, God grant, be spiritually selfish.
Well, good morning to each and every one of you, and welcome to the Church of the Holy Quest. Welcome each of you here present in person today, and those of you joining us online, and anyone here for the first time. We offer you a very warm welcome on this Labor Day weekend. It's when families celebrate the final vacation of summer, right? It's this transition from summer to fall, our final vacation days. And for me, growing up in San Diego, Labor Day weekend always meant, yes, the tourists will be leaving, the good weather will be coming, and we have to go back to school. So that was our Labor Day. So Labor Day is also, as we know, a day that was created to honor all the hardworking Americans and people who labor so diligently and contribute so much to our communities and our society. So it's a time that we can reflect on the physical work that we do in the world, also mentally, and a time also to reflect spiritually as well. As our co-founder of Flower A. Newhouse mentions, if we can recognize that all labor is holy, we can then bring to our work, no matter what it is, whether it's just mopping a floor or tilling the soil, as she says, if it is done with a consciousness of God and Christ and the whole, then that is what makes it holy. Colossians 3:23 says, "Whatever you do, work at it with all your heart, as working for the Lord, not for human masters." So here at Quest Haven, we also remember those who labor out of labors of love on the inner worlds for us, as well as the material worlds and physical worlds. So today we begin a series of Sunday talks in preparation for our Michaelmas retreat to celebrate and express our appreciation for the kingdom of angels. So Reverend Lucy Wold is going to start us off on this journey with her talk entitled Angels and Near-Death Experiencers, to bring us glimpses of this glorious work that's taking place on the inner realms. As Flowery Newhouse also tells us, quote, "Angels are the mediators that bridge between humanity and the divine. Their invisible influence works constantly to restrain and purify evil, to awaken dormant good in all things. These tremendous intelligences, serving all God's creations, have helped humanity from its inception." So as our Quest Haven choir comes down, let us stand, if you choose, and sing together the Lord's Prayer. So as we take our seats and settle in for our morning invocation, let us enter into the stillness from within. And feel the holy presence that surrounds us within these chapel walls as we breathe in this glorious presence in celebration today. O divine God presence and eternal living Christ, Holy Comforter, and all the angels and beings of the inner and higher worlds, we welcome you this day. We are here with you and for you in this moment. So utterly grateful for this gift of life you have given us, and for all your glorious and unceasing and tireless labors of love you do for us on the other side and on the inner, to help purify us and cleanse us and help remove the veil that somehow seems to keep clouding our vision, clouding our mind, and getting in the way of us remembering you, who you are, and therefore who we are. It is with the deepest gratitude and reverence that we are here in this moment, receiving all your love and light and joy that streams down and emanates through every cell and atom of every part of our bodies. Please bless us that we will be pure channels to receive your effervescent light and love and presence. That others may share in it also. We ask that you bless our speaker this morning, that her words may reach us so purely and so joyfully, so that she may share with us all that she has learned and that you have brought to her in her journey in learning more about the other side, so that we may catch glimpses of the truth that lies beyond. That unseen truth that we know is here, right now in this moment, forever. We ask this in your name, O Lord Christ. Amen. And now the Quest Haven Voice Choir will sing The Gift of Music by Robert Clatterbuck, followed by Reverend Lucy Wold and her talk.
The summer breeze to strum the meadow, and
As you have heard, as we move into the month of September each year, at Questhaven, our thoughts turn to angels, the time of Michaelmas. And we know how much the angels do for us every day of our lives. What I would like to focus on today is the very active role they take in interacting with those people who have a temporary death experience where they go to the other side, and the angels are with them most of the time, and then they're returned to earth rather than going on to the other side permanently. Descriptions given by growing numbers of people from all over the world who have had near-death experiences in which they leave their bodies on earth and their soul goes with them to the higher realms, with the angels accompanying them, providing them with helpful information often and advice, and then telling them it's not their time yet and they must return to their bodies. Those who have written about these experiences describe the functions of these angels as guides, messengers, escorts, or protectors. Some call them agents of God who radiate a sense of peace, serenity, trust, and love. Almost all of these people who have experienced a near death say they do not recall ever having any kind of impact or relationship with these beings before. This was their first time. You're probably familiar, being at Questhaven, with near-death experiences and have probably heard people describe them. I searched the writings and the talks of Questhaven's founder, the Reverend Flower A. Newhouse, about near-death experiences, and I didn't find anything. She gave us a great deal of information about the actual process of dying, but I didn't find anything about near-death experiences. I think perhaps in Flower's time, it was, as one person said, kind of a fringy thing, not really appropriate to talk about. But today, it has become a major topic of conversation. But what we may not realize is that there's a long history of knowledge of near-death experiences throughout many civilizations. NDEs, as they've come to be called, are said to have been experienced by over 8 million people just in the United States alone, but they've been reported all over the world since ancient times. Ancient religious texts such as the New Testament, the Quran, and the Tibetan Book of the Dead describe experiences of life after death that resemble our understanding of it today. 2 Corinthians 12, 2 through 4 tells us, I know a man in Christ who 14 years ago was caught up to the third heaven. Whether it was in the body or not, I do not know. God knows. He was caught up to paradise and heard inexpressible things, things that no one is permitted to tell. So even the Bible talks about near-death experiences. Those experiences are reported by about 17% of those who do come close to dying. They've been reported by every kind of person, children, adults, priests, ministers, doctors, scientists, the atheists, as well as the religious, from countries all over the world. And while no two near-death experiences are the same, there are some commonalities that many people experience. Feeling very comfortable and free of pain. You have a sensation of leaving the body, sometimes being able to see the physical body while you're floating above it. The mind functioning more clearly and more rapidly than usual. A sensation of being drawn into a tunnel or a darkness. A brilliant light is at the end of the tunnel, and a sense of overwhelming peace and unconditional love envelops most people. A sense of having access to unlimited knowledge, a life review, recall of your past life, and in some cases, your future, and encounters with deceased loved ones. There's a quote by an institute that researches near deaths. Near-death experiences are intensely vivid and often life-transforming experiences, many of which occur under extreme physiological conditions, such as trauma, ceasing of brain activity, deep general anesthesia, cardiac arrest, in which no awareness or sensory experiences of any kind should be possible, according to the latest findings of neuroscience. They occur at a time when a person is so physically compromised that they're typically unconscious, comatose, or clinically dead. So in addition to describing the interactions between what some people call the beings of light, and I think those must be angels, the experiencers usually see beautiful colors, they hear beautiful music, exceedingly beautiful light, and beauty and joy they've never known before. So for many, it's just an amazingly wonderful experience. At some point, before these souls reach a certain place, they're told that it is not yet their time, and they must return to their bodies on earth. They very quickly find themselves back in their body that may be racked with pain from an accident or a medical procedure or an illness, and they may face a long, painful recovery. From what I've learned from research, it seems that we, who still live in human bodies, can receive a great deal of helpful information about how to conduct our own lives from other people's NDE experiences. We don't have to have that experience ourselves to learn from them. So I've chosen stories that I thought would be helpful to us. Many I had never heard before, so they were new to me. So I invite you to pay attention to certain things, what the experiencers are told about their lives when they're on the other side, mostly by angelic beings, how much their lives change after having a near-death experience, and the fact that most never see their lives in the same way again. For many, their entire worldview changes, and their way of being in the world is entirely different than it was before their experience. Causes of NDE are complex and not fully known. They've tried to find out what may have caused them or how they're caused, but there's not any kind of real answer to that yet. One thing that really surprised me, and it was interesting, doctors who have treated these patients have stated that some of the trauma people experience, such as being underwater for 12 minutes or being in a coma with a 1% chance of recovery, the only reason they were able to come back to their bodies and have a full life after that was because they had a near-death experience. And if they hadn't had that, they would have just died. So that was a big surprise to me, and I don't think anybody really understands it. The oldest surviving explicit report of a near-death experience in Western literature comes from the famed Greek philosopher Plato, who described an event he called the myth of In those days, the word myth meant the account of, or the talk about. So this means the account given by is E-R, and this was a man. The story begins as a man named son of Arminius of Pamphylia, died in battle. When the corpses of those who died in battle were collected 10 days later, after their deaths, the bodies were decaying, all except who was not decomposed at all. 2 days later, revived on his funeral pyre, and then he tells others of his journey to the afterlife, and giving an account of reincarnation and of celestial spheres of the astral plane. He says his soul went forth from his body, and he journeyed with a great company to a mysterious region where judges sat. They sent some souls to the right to heaven, and some souls to the left who went downward. When himself got closer to the judges, they told him he must be a messenger to humanity to tell them of that other world. And they said, pay close attention to everything you see and hear. So learns that the choices we make and the character we develop while we're alive will have consequences for us after we die. He returned to life to encourage humans to acquire virtues of wisdom, courage, love, justice, and moderation. Story so greatly impacted Plato that he based a lot of his philosophy on this story, and his philosophy affected many other societies. Near the end of the 15th century, a great painter, Hieronymus Bosch, gave his vision of the hereafter in his painting Ascent of the Blessed, which now hangs in the Palazzo Ducale in Venice, Italy. And here's his painting. See how close it looks to what we think of near-death experiences today. It shows a familiar scene with souls ascending through a tunnel toward a shining light, strikingly resembling our modern-day descriptions of near-death experiences, and this was in the 15th century. Now, many of you are familiar, being at Questhaven, of the work of Carl Jung, the Swiss psychiatrist who lived from 1875 to 1961. He described his own near-death experience in his autobiography, Memories, Dreams, Reflections. Two things were just kind of jumped out at me. He didn't think very highly of the earth and what we have to do on earth. He was not happy. He called it box-like. And interestingly, most of his most meaningful writing that we all read these days were only accomplished after he had his near-death experience. So he learned a lot from it, too. When he was 69, he was hospitalized with a broken foot, and he suffered a heart attack. Then, as he later wrote, and I'm going to quote him, "In a state of unconsciousness, I hung on the edge of death. A nurse told me it was as if you were surrounded by a bright glow. Extremely strange things began to happen to me. It seemed I was high up in space. Below, I saw the globe of Earth, bathed in a gloriously blue light. I could see Ceylon, which is now Sri Lanka, the subcontinent of India, and the snow-covered Himalayas. I knew I was on the point of departing from the Earth. The sight of the Earth from this height was the most glorious thing I have ever seen. A short distance away, I saw in space a tremendous dark block of stone, like a meteorite, about the size of my house. A black Hindu sat silently in the lotus posture upon a stone bench, and I knew that he expected me. As I approached the steps to the entrance, a strange thing happened. I had the feeling that everything was being sloughed away. Everything I aimed for or wished for or had a thought about, it fell away and was stripped from me. Quite a painful experience. I realized I consisted of my own history and felt with great certainty, this is what I am. As I approached the temple, I had certainty that I was about to enter an illuminated room and would meet all those people to whom I belong. I would at last understand what historical nexus my life fitted into. I would know what had been before me, why I had come into being, and where my life was flowing. I felt sure I would receive an answer to all these questions as soon as I entered the rock temple. Then something happened from below that caught my attention. From the direction of Europe, an image floated up. It was my doctor, or an image of him, framed by a golden laurel wreath. An exchange took place between us. The doctor had been delegated by Earth to deliver a message to me to tell me that there was a protest against my going away. I had no right to leave Earth, and I must return. The vision ceased. Now I must return to that box system again. It seemed to me I was returning to an artificial world in which each person sat by himself in a little box, and the whole world struck me as a prison. I had been so glad to shed it all. I was very angry at my doctor, who would not speak of all that passed between us in my vision. Now I must go back to that drab world. Then he went back, and each night in the hospital he would lie awake for about an hour as if in ecstasy, floating in space in the womb of the universe. Those inner states he was having were so fantastically beautiful that by comparison, this world appeared to him as ridiculous. These visions ceased the closer I got to really getting back into my life again. They were not the product of my imagination. They were totally real. I have never entirely freed myself of the impression that this life is a segment of existence enacted in a 3D box-like universe, especially set up for it. After my illness, a fruitful period of work began, and a good many of my principal works were written only then. I no longer attempted to put across my own opinion, but surrendered myself to the current of my thought. And something else came to me from my illness. I gave an unconditional yes to acceptance of my own nature as I happened to be. Now, he was very angry at his doctor for bringing him back. He did not want to come back. Then he started to worry about his doctor because what he had seen of his doctor, he said his doctor was in his primal form. And from what Jung knew, when you're in your primal form, you will die. And he was fearful that his doctor would die in his stead. And that's exactly what happened. Jung was his last patient. The doctor soon died of septicemia, or blood poisoning. Interestingly, Ernest Hemingway seems to have experienced a classic NDE when he was injured by an exploding shell during World War I. He wrote home that he had died and said dying is a very simple thing. Then years later, he adapted his own near-death experience into his short story, The Snows of Kilimanjaro. Most NDEers say they have trouble speaking about their experience because there aren't words to describe it. One says it's like trying to draw an odor with a crayon. But they describe a sense of connectedness to other people, to nature, to the universe, and to the divine, so much more connected than they ever were before. It changes everything. It makes them much less interested in power and fame. Most say this is the most important thing that ever happened to me. I'm no longer afraid of death. So I'll tell you some stories, and I ask you to take in what happens between the people and the angels. One woman tells of being taken to another world by an angel who told her that she was one of the many guardian angels with the responsibility of bringing the dead into the light. The woman said, in an instant, I recalled my life in a sudden flash. It was the most totally exciting, fantastic thing I've ever seen. I saw the time I was brought to earth from heaven by an angel, to a body, how I was received at a hospital, how my parents loved me. I saw everything that ever happened to me in my life, all in an instant. And she describes going through many different dimensions in her travels. The angel told her that it was her, the angel's task, to give her a message about the promises and commitments to do some work that she had made before coming in, a responsibility that would have a great missionary effect. She was told, I am your guardian angel. I have been following you constantly while you were on earth. A 9-year-old boy said he was met by a group of angels without wings. They were glowing and seemed to love me very much, he said. They held hands to form a stairway to heaven, and the angel at the top explained some things to the boy about what he was seeing and gave him some advice. Several children described the angels they saw as very tall, at least 7 feet, very nice, with bright golden hair and wearing a long white gown tied at the waist. A 31-year-old woman spoke of going through a tunnel with great acceleration that filled her with peace and love. She met an angelic being in a white dress who gave her motherly love. She told her it was not her time yet and she would have to return to Earth. What was unusual about this woman's story was 15 years later, her daughter was severely injured by an out-of-control dog who took a big chunk out of her left cheek. So this woman was in the hospital cradling and helping her daughter recover when the very same angel she had seen before appeared over her left shoulder and communicated telepathically that not to worry, her daughter would be okay. She just totally recognized the angel, except she said there was one difference. Before, the angel had her hair flowing down over her shoulders. This time, it was the same angel with her hair up on top of her head. The woman was convinced that a personal relationship existed between herself and the lady in white. She felt she was her own special guardian angel. Another woman reported as she was traveling with an angel to a higher plane, she kind of held back and hesitated to draw nearer, and the angel said to her, "Yes, we must now become one with the light so that we may ascend higher." She said it was the most beautiful and compelling light I had ever seen. The woman had just arrived at the hospital with pain in her head, and she saw this light whipping round and round, and she just had such an uncanny sense of well-being. She heard the sound of bells. She said, "I felt encouraged by this force of love from this angel that was searching and probing my deepest thoughts. Then my whole body jumped upward from an electric jolt that they gave me at the hospital, and I knew I was back in my body." So she obviously was having some kind of cardioversion treatment, and she said she was back in her body, but she said, "I have no fear of death." A man named Bruce, who prided himself on his self-taught career of repairing heavy machinery, was working under a truck and thinking about a discussion he had just that morning had with his wife about faith. Another mechanic asked for his help because he thought there was an oil leak under another truck. So he put a jack in and crawled under, and suddenly that jack shot out and the whole truck came down across his midsection, crushing him to the floor. He said out loud, "God help me." Next, he found himself watching from about 15 feet in the air. He saw his head, he saw the other mechanic who had raised up the truck with another jack, and the mechanic was saying, "I don't want you to move. The paramedics are coming. Please don't die." So Bruce saw his head with his body was under the truck. He shut his eyes, and then when he opened them again, he saw two incredible figures kneeling on either side of the other mechanic. He said, "I knew they were angels," and I think from his description they were male angels. He said they were massive, powerful ones. I could only see their backs. They wore radiant white robes made from some type of heavy material as if it was woven from ropes. They had curly blonde hair, and he thought to himself, "I think this is what happens when you die." The paramedic rushed in, seemingly oblivious to the angels, knelt next to my head. She talked to me as I watched from above. Then she tapped me on the cheek. I could feel again, and she said, "Open your eyes. Keep those eyes open. It's very important." I was alive. The angels were gone. Excruciating pain ripped through my body. Why had the angels left? I felt myself fading again. Then I heard a powerful voice. "If you want to live, I'm here, but it won't be easy. You're going to have to fight harder than you've ever fought for anything. Are you willing?" It wasn't an angel or a paramedic. It was God's voice speaking deep inside me, deeper than the pain. I'd have to fight. But not alone. The image of his wife and children came. "God," I prayed, "I want to live. I want to fight for them and for you. I'll do whatever it takes." So he addresses his wife, Lori. He says, "Lori, as long as you can see, you're alive. You were right. God has something he needs me to do. I know he'll help me figure it out. Lori, I saw angels. He sent angels to help me. 2 more surgeries, literally putting my insides back together. It was months before the pain subsided, enough for me to function. Today, I travel around the world sharing my story. He wrote a book about his experience. He said, it changed my life forever. I discovered strength our Lord offers us to draw from in ways I never could have believed. Another story, which has its own unique features. Barbara Bartolome, and I believe she lived in Santa Barbara, had a near-death experience in 1987. She had injured her back and was having surgery on it to try to make it better. But one of the medical personnel pushed a wrong button, and the dye that they were using went into her brain. So she found herself on the ceiling, looking down. She felt great love, and then felt a large being, presumably an angel, next to her. Someone yelled, "Code Blue." She didn't know what that meant, but most of you probably do, that it means the patient's in critical status and likely needs resuscitation. So medical personnel came in and started working on the body, but then she saw from the ceiling that she was flatlining. There was no heartbeat. She said to the angel beside her, "I really want to go back to take care of my 5-month-old baby and 8-year-old son." She said she hadn't lived out her purpose in life yet. But the angel asked her what she was going to do with her life. Her life was not going well. She had a very abusive and controlling husband, and she had stayed with him. She said to the angel, "I promise, if I'm allowed to go back, that I will get up the courage to leave my marriage." She went back. It took 3 years, but she did finally leave her marriage. She was frustrated because every time she tried to tell, especially medical people, about her experience, that's just an hallucination, don't pay any attention to it. But she recreated everything that had happened, and about them pounding on her chest and everything, and none of the medical personnel would believe her. Finally, a nurse whose mother was dying, she told about it to make the woman feel better about her mother dying, and the nurse believed her. Then a short time later, the internet came, and she looked up what had happened to her, and she discovered it was called a near-death experience. So she was glad to have a name for it. And then she learned there was a near-death experience research foundation that was concerned with documenting and researching NDEs, and that they were having a conference in San Diego that year, 2009. I think my husband may have gone to that. At the conference, people were talking about one of the common after effects of near-death experiences, which is for many people a great increase in intuitive ability. They know things without knowing how they know things. But Barbara, that didn't make sense to her because she had already had the ability to do that. She had since a child. She was very super intuitive. So she said to the person standing next to her at the talk that she already had that. And the woman said to her, "You likely had a near-death experience as a baby." This woman that was standing next to her happened to be PMH Atwater, an international authority and one of the most knowledgeable people about near-death experiences. She's now 85. She's said to have passed away 3 times herself and come back. She was one of the first people to research near-death experiences and has written about 16 books about death experiences, and you can find her on Google and YouTube. But Barbara, who had just asked her that question, thought that whole thing was wacky. She never heard of her dying as a child, and her parents were dead. But she did go to visit her older brother and asked about her childhood. And here's what he said: "There's something I need to apologize for. I never felt it was the right time to tell you. You died when you were 18 months old. You had a very high fever, and you were very sick. I was 12. Mom called the doctors, and they told her to put you in tepid water and then to add ice cubes to the water. I had to go to the neighbors because in those days we only had one ice cube tray. You were purple, and Mom was sobbing over you. The firemen were on the way. Suddenly, after the ice cubes were in, you arched your back, and you took a deep breath and started crying. The firemen got there and helped and took you to the hospital. And she had never heard of this experience. She was shocked. Her strong intuition, she had all the time. One day she was on a street with her mother, and she put her hands up like this, and her mother said, "What's wrong?" And she said, "Two cars are about to crash into each other." And then the accident happened, and her mother's reaction was, "Don't ever let anyone know you can do that." She was very upset with her. There was a boy in her high school who was dying, and he was very scared about dying, and she told him about what it was like on the other side, and he seemed to feel better. Her grandfather died, and her sisters were crying, but she was happy for him. She thought that was wonderful, but her mother asked why she was not crying, so she forced herself to cry in order to appease her mother. But she knew her grandfather would be so happy because he was going home. She said, "When people pass away, I realize they continue on. I still had a relationship with them. Consciousness still existed. I sent them love, and they would know that I was doing that. I was sending love across the veil to them." She said it's a huge gift to know that death is not the end. It changes the way you look at people. You don't see them by their height, their skin color, their body size, their intellect. You see them as souls. It improved my life so much to know this. Barbara felt that those changes in her attitude and behavior resulting from her near-death experience became stronger as she grew older, not weaker, as you might expect. Many of you I know are familiar with the report of Mary Neal, MD, a board-certified orthopedic spine surgeon who died in a kayak accident in 1999. She was trapped underwater for 12 minutes, just stuck. She couldn't get herself out anyway. She was not a religious person, but she said, "God, may your will be done." She didn't know much about God. She didn't know much about religion. She was a very medical, scientific person, but she said, "Thy will be done." And she felt herself held in the arms of Christ, who reassured her that her family would be okay whether she lived or died. And she said the spirits, who were probably angels, took her to a beautiful place and told her she had to go back, that one of her sons, she had 3 sons and 1 daughter, I believe, one of her sons would be killed when he was in his teens, and she had to be there to support her family through that. Her son did die at the age of 19 when a distracted driver hit him from behind when he was roller skiing, those long things that look like roller skates, but they're long like a ski. She hadn't told anyone about that part of her experience until after her son died, because she was hoping that it was wrong. And then she divulged the whole story after that. She said, "As a surgeon and analytical thinker, I tried to come up with a medical scientific explanation for what I'd experienced. I was trying to disprove my own experiences." But she said the only conclusion she came up with was that she had been sent back to her body from a place she called heaven. She watched her friends as they pulled her body from the water, performed CPR, and then she was back in her body. She's been featured in Netflix series Surviving Death, and has given numerous talks. You can find her all over YouTube. And she gave a TED Talk called "Death Brings Context to Life." One other kayaking incident, a young woman, like Mary, was wedged between rocks and frigid water, and the darkness gave way, and there was this dizzying light, and the pain and ceased. She said, and I'll quote her, "I zoomed horizontally across a narrow tunnel enveloped by unconditional love. I exited the tunnel into a room formed by pure white clouds. Before me hovered 3 beings, each a shimmering, translucent crystal, 6 to 7 feet tall. As if sensing my distress, the beings transformed into typical biblical angels, and love radiated from their iridescent eyes." And I felt so sad when she said, "For the first time in my life, I felt I belonged. These angels, for the first time in her life, helped her feel that she belonged. They told her, "You have arrived too soon. You must go back and finish your work. Since you are here, we will show you some things." And this is kind of different. The angels produced a book from which snapshots of my life flashed rapidly by. Then I saw my future, a man whose face I could not see, and 2 children. It seems a little different way to have a life review. I want to have you see one example of a life review. I went into a dark place with nothing around me, but I wasn't scared. It was really peaceful there. I then began to see my whole life unfolding before me like a film projected on a screen, from babyhood to adult life. It was so real. I was looking at myself, but better than a 3D movie, I was also capable of sensing the feelings of persons I had interacted with through the years. I could feel the good and bad emotions that I made them go through. The angel told her, "I am Yashael. I have been with you since the beginning. You must go back. You have to be there for them." But I didn't want to go back. When she did get back in her body, the memories had vanished, but then she started having dreams that brought all this back to her. And sometime later, she met a man, and the first thing he asked her was, "What's the weirdest thing that's ever happened to you?" And you know what her answer was. She ended up marrying that man, and they have 2 children, just as the angels told her. And then finally, some of you will remember Evan Alexander, a neurosurgeon, who went into a severe coma because of meningitis that no one is ever expected to recover from. And you can find his story all laid out in his book, Proof of Heaven. He was ashamed because he used to tell his patients, he was a neurosurgeon, he'd operate, they'd come out and they'd say, "Oh, I went to this beautiful white light." "That's nothing, that's just an hallucination, don't pay any attention to it." He felt terrible that he had done that because his own experience, he said, was more real than anything real he'd ever seen. Then another well-known doctor that you may know about, who has long worked with NDEs, is Raymond Moody. And you may remember the story of George Ritchie, Anita Moorjani, and many others, and all of them are worth researching and learning about. There's so many wonderful stories. And I just want to mention 2 experiences I learned about that I'd never heard about before. One is called shared death experiences. It's said that sometimes a person who is in a room with a dying person may accompany that dying person at least part of the way to the inner world. The dying person goes ahead and dies, and the other person returns. And for a while, they thought, well, it just must be a loved one that's in the room with the patient and has this journey. But now the doctors are reporting that they have had these shared death experiences with their patients. The patient goes to the inner world, and the doctor accompanies them for a little while. No one knows what triggers them. Then, one last thing that I had never heard of called terminal lucidity. And this happens to Alzheimer's patients when their mind just simply is not there. And within a short time of their dying, they suddenly become lucid again. And they greet you as if they're their normal selves for a brief period of time, just at the point when they're ready to make their transition. So it's almost as if they've come to say goodbye. And people who are with this person feel like they've been given a final gift. So leaves them stunned and thrilled that they had one last interaction with this loved one. So I just want to, in closing, call your attention to 2 institutions that have been researching near-death experiences for many years. The Near-Death Experience Research Foundation, NDERF.org, with over 3,700 near-death experiences posted on their website, the largest collection of publicly accessible near-death experiences in the world. The second one is the one that Barbara came to San Diego to experience. It's called EONS, the International Association of Near-Death Studies, based in Durham, North Carolina. They're studying individuals who have had a near-death experience by an online study. So, we have a lot to look forward to when we pass from this world for real. But it's so nice, I think, that we have the experience of these others who are willing to share so that we can learn a lot from them. Thank you.
Lay down your sweet and weary head. Night is falling. You've come to journey's end. Sleep now and dream of the ones who came before. They are calling from across the distant shore. Why do you weep? What are these tears upon your face? Soon you will see all of your fears will pass away, safe in my arms. You're only sleeping. What can you see? On the horizon, why do the white gulls call? Across the sea, a pale moon rises. The ships have come to carry you home. Dawn will turn to silver glass, a light on the water, all souls pass, hope fades into the world of night, through shadows falling out of memory and time. Don't say we have come now to the end. White shores are calling. You and I will meet again, and you'll be here in my arms, just sleeping. What can you see? On the horizon, why do the white gulls call?
I think I'll give us a moment after that. Thank you, Reverend Lucy, so much for helping us glimpse what does lie across the horizon. So now comes time for our announcements and gratitude. So thank you to all of you who came out yesterday for the Servers in Action session. So talk about laboring in love for these sacred grounds at Quest Haven. Thank you so much. And we also thank those of you that serve through your giving. So you can do that as you leave here today in the narthex. We have a receptacle if you'd like to leave a gift. And there are so many ways, as you know, to give of yourself and serve the Christ and all of this community here at Quest Haven. So next Sunday, we continue this Michaelmas preparation in this series with Reverend Dan Willis giving us a talk entitled The Angels in Our Midst. And this sharing explores specific angels whose focus is on ministering to humans on earth and helping to manifest God's reality and will in their lives. So we will learn how our conscious connection with them enables their greater access and blessings to our ongoing God unfoldment. There's a reminder that Gale Starr's Celebration of Life Memorial Service will be in the church today at 2:30. And the Quest Haven Adventurers' next adventure, already, right? Didn't you just have one? The kayaking journey will be Saturday, September 9th, meeting at 8 a.m. here at Quest Haven. And we'll be going to see the 500-year-old Indian petroglyphs just off the Quest Haven property. So that is definitely not one to miss. And then hiking 4 miles round trip in Elfin Forest Preserve to the Olivenhain Reservoir, where there are bathrooms and a picnic area. So all are welcome to join us. And as well, please join us for fellowship and refreshments at the Friendship House following this service. And now I will call Felice up to give a last announcement before Lucy's benediction.
Well, I have another passing to announce. Ann Meyersdork, who was a very long time attendee and friend here at Quest Haven, made her transition this past week. And so we will be having a celebration of her life here at the Church of the Holy Quest on Saturday, September 23rd at 1:30 in the afternoon. And all are welcome to attend that.
I just want to add one more thing. Reverend Hal Lingerman sent me a wonderful near-death experience of a doctor who died after being struck by lightning when he was on the telephone in a telephone booth. And the most unusual thing to me, when he came back, he had this compelling desire to listen to classical music. And he said, I'm a child of the 60s. All I knew was rock and roll. And he just had to listen to this music. And not only that, but he learned to play classical music. And at the end of the video, you see him doing beautiful piano. Thank you, Hal. It was a very interesting story. Lord Emmanuel, the living Christ, we are so blessed by all the gifts we are given to help us live better lives. Help us to take in what people who have experienced a near death have had so that we may learn lessons from their experience of how to be better souls, of how not to see people by the color of their skin or their height or their body mass. Let us instead see them as souls. Let us befriend them as souls. Let us learn, as you have taught us, to love one another as you have loved us. Help each of us to know you more deeply without having to have a near-death experience. Help us each to grow by learning what others have experienced. In thy name, most holy Lord Christ, we pray. Amen. In your quiet times, whether first thing in the morning, high noon, or as the sun is setting, tune in to the angels, speak with your guardian, give her a name, as Flower suggested that we do, and have that angel become a more important part of your life every day. Amen.